Dobrý deň, vítame vás z konferencie Globsec. Je 31. augusta, budeme dnes hovoriť o európsko-atlanticko-ázijských vzťahoch. Naším hosťom je pani Theresa Fallon, zakladateľka a riaditeľka Bruselského centra pre rusko-európsko-ázijské štúdie. Mrs. Fallon, good morning, or is it afternoon rather? No, it's morning, sorry. Mrs. Fallon, I shall start rather generally. Why is Indo-Pacific region and the events happening within Asian region important for us in Europe or in the Euro-Atlantic area? Because not all the people take this truth for granted that it is.
Exactly. Europe should be interested because this is where a majority of their trade flows through. So the idea of the global commons and the free movement of ships is key to European prosperity. So anything that happens in the Indo-Pacific, say there's a problem with China and Taiwan, or we're seeing the Philippines or Japan or South Korea, this would affect trade all the way to Europe. So I think it's a key area, and what happens in the Indo-Pacific, these two areas are deeply connected. And I think that in general, the Europeans tended to think, oh, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, we shouldn't be concerned about the Indo-Pacific, but we're seeing more and more of an interconnectedness.
Well, I mean, many Europeans take account of it, but they take it as predominantly an economic issue or exclusively an economic issue. But this sounds like it's also a geostrategic issue, is it?
It's key. And if something should happen, for example, in Taiwan, all our technology, the most advanced chips come from Taiwan. So your phone, your advanced computers, your electric cars, all of these are laden with these advanced chips. So some have described it as a silicon shield over Taiwan, but we're seeing increasing strong rhetoric from Xi Jinping. He has told his troops to be ready, the People's Liberation Army, PLA, to be ready to invade by 2027. It doesn't mean he's going to invade then, but he wants everything to be ready by then. Some have said it's already ready to do that. So it also is creating a lot more tensions in the region with Japan. Just last week, a Chinese plane penetrated Japanese airspace, which really sent Japan into a tailspin. That's, you know, almost an act of war if you consider it. And I think that the fact that the Japanese have doubled their defense budget shows how concerned they are about the evolving strategic climate in the region. And also in the past, Japan and South Korea, because of their history, the relations were not so good. So it took China to bring Japan and South Korea together, and they're doing historic cooperation in regards to diplomatic relations, economic relations, and even kind of helping each other with the defense area in regard to keeping track of where ships are and things like that.
It's just not just about the airspace penetration, it's also cyberspace penetration,
Exactly.
Isn't it? And hybrid war, especially concerning Taiwan. Well, but what about, there is a context. There is a war in Ukraine. War in Ukraine isolates somewhat Russia from Europe. Does this mean, and will it in the future mean more and more Asiatization of Russian policies? Is that true? Or
Putin has made a choice. Now we saw with 2014 with the annexation of Crimea and sanctions being put on Russia. Some have said they had no choice but to turn towards China. It was an opportunity for China. But now I'm finding, and then we saw the February 2022 No Limits Partnership that was signed right before the Chinese Olympics in Beijing by both Putin and Xi. And that just predated the invasion of Ukraine by several days. So I think that they have come to some sort of agreement. They share a huge border, and the fact that this agreement was made meant that Russia could move a lot of their troops from their Far East to fight in Ukraine. So I think that they have an agreement. Maybe they thought it would be a short war, but it seems now that the Chinese have far more confidence. They used to try to claim that they were neutral, but they leaned towards Russia. But there's growing evidence, because there are red lines, that the Chinese cannot send lethal weaponry to Russia. But in this day and age, how do you characterize dual-use goods? They sell drones, they sell precursors for weapons, and this is helping to keep the Russian military machine running. And in addition to that, Russia sells low-cost energy to both China and India at a substantial discount. So I think that this also helps keep the coffers full so that Russia can pay for the war in Ukraine.
But there's also North Korea with its regime as it is, not mentioning Iran. Is there some axis of powers growing out of it?
It's looking very desperate, isn't it? It feels that
down the glow to status quo.
It feels like the Avengers. Everyone's picking a team, and this axis of disruption. These are great disruptors: Iran, North Korea, Russia, China. China is kind of part of this group, but if you look at it, it also echoes the BRICS, the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So China is putting together various groups of people. Now, China's strategic doctrine is not to have alliances. Their only alliance is with North Korea. Nevertheless, you see some strategic convergence unheard of before. In Europe, what are we seeing? We're seeing Russia, China, naval exercises in the Mediterranean, in the Baltic Sea. Some cables were cut allegedly by accident. So you see this coordination between Russia and China. We saw China exercises with Belarus at the time of the NATO summit. So it's not that Indo-Pacific is far away for the Europeans. China's here already, and I think we should start paying attention to that. In addition, we have the far north now, and China has described themselves as a near Arctic power. They're about 1,500 kilometers away from the Arctic. Nevertheless, they know that it will be important over the longer term strategic vision that they have. So with Russia weakened, they can ask Russia for things that Russia would have never given them in the past. So access to some of the bases in the Arctic, and also China wants the advanced technology that Russia has for silent submarine engines and advanced missile technology that can be launched from submarines. So as Russia weakens, China can ask more from Russia.
Is Russia interested in an eventual escalation of the conflict, or the potential conflict, between People's Republic of China and Taiwan?
Is Russia interested in that? I would not be able to stake out that territory in Putin's brain. There has been a lot of speculation. How much would Russia help them? Would they help them? But we even saw recent naval exercises in that region with a Russian carrier and a Chinese carrier. So some have speculated China is a very good strategic thinker. They diversify their energy supplies, but there's pipes going from Russia to China. Of course, those could be bombed, but this would be some energy, some oil, some natural gas that would avoid the Malacca Strait trap that is part of the South China Sea. So China has diversified their energy, and Russia together, let me put it this way. This summer, many Chinese think tankers and former diplomats, now turned think tankers, were coming through Brussels, and I met with several of them. And when the war originally broke out, they were trying to say, well, we're not so close. Now they don't even try to hide the fact. One man, let me quote him, he said, "We're preparing for war. Russia and China have to stay together because everyone knows if Russia and China are together, we will win." So I was so taken aback by this frankness, because in the past, I got the impression that they would talk out of both sides of their mouth. They would tell the audience what they wanted them to hear. But now it seems they have increased confidence, and they are in it to win it with China. So these types of comments I find very disturbing, and I think we better take this threat far more seriously than we are.
Yet one more speculation. If there was a war of North Korea against South Korea, would China have been engaged?
Well, this is what strategists are deeply concerned about, because Kim Jong-un has changed the constitution, saying that we are no longer trying to reunite with our brothers in the South, that they are foreign to us and that we have no interest. So this is kind of a deeply disturbing sign to those in the South. In the past, there was sunshine diplomacy, there was efforts to get along. And because of the International Criminal Court's it won't allow President Putin to travel around the world. There are only so many places he can go. He can go to Russia, he can go to Beijing, he can go to North Korea. But he also, when he was on his trip to North Korea, he asked for lethal weapon support to continue the war in Ukraine. So some have, and then there's always a trade-off, right? So some have suggested that in exchange for all of this, Moscow would offer advanced missile technology. So this made made Japan and South Korea even more nervous, because this destabilizes their neighborhood. So you have the East China Sea and the South China Sea area more destabilized by having a North Korea with more advanced technology, advanced missiles. So this is something that works against Beijing's interest. So everyone thinks that they're so close, but there are some areas where you see that Putin, who's showing, I have other options. All right, North Korea is not the best option, but he was kind of saying, I'm not a vassal of China. I still have agency, and I have options. I can go to North Korea, get these weapons. But the downside of that for Beijing, for Xi Jinping, is that it made Japan and South Korea even more fearful of China, because North Korea getting these weapons destabilizes the region. And this is not in China's interest, because then they will even spend more on improving their preparedness for defense.
And there is no hope of some erosion of this North Korean regime?
I mean, it's a terrible situation to be in. I actually visited North Korea, and it's like the whole country is a prison.
The opposite way.
It's very deeply disturbing, and the language coming out of there. So some analysts have said that if it would be a 1-2 punch. So to stretch the U.S. Military, sure, it would be for Taiwan, and also having an event take place simultaneously on the Korean Peninsula. There are about 35,000 U.S. troops on the Korean Peninsula trying to keep the peace between the North and the South. And if China did something with Taiwan, it would really, be a stretch. So there are many ideas by military planners what China might be up to.
To conclude, what can we do about this?
We have to, as the ancient Romans said, if you want peace, you have to prepare for war. It's not an area that is it will have immediate impact. But if something should happen, God forbid, in this region, the U.S. will have to move special equipment to that region.
Away from some other regions.
So Europe especially. So Europe needs to get prepared. So the U.S. would probably move plane refueling, and so the Europeans need to spend money now and start building them now to be prepared for this. They're not going to move brigades of soldiers, but they will need necessary equipment. So they have to prioritize what equipment they will need in case there is some sort of terrible event that takes place in the South China Sea or somewhere else in the Indo-Pacific. So I think that Europe has had 2.5 years to prepare. They need to move quicker. It's painful, right? You have to spend money, and the economy's bad. It's hard to get voters to get on board with this, but they really need to prioritize.
Theresa Fallon, thank you for your interview.
Thank you so much.